Item number 3, approval of the Human Resources Monthly Report.
Dr. Johnson, members of the board, Mr. Thurman, the Human Resources Report for the month of October 2013 reflects the following. We show that we have a total of 99 new non-contracted employees, 243 new non-contracted employees, 99 contracted employees, 243 new non-contracted employees, 82 resignations, 11 terminations. Please note that the high number of new non-contracted employees are essentially, we are increasing and enhancing our substitute pool in order to comply with the Affordable Care Act. We have a new substitute time management process in place, and with that particular process, we have invited a number of retired teachers to come back and substitute teach within the district. So that is the increase in the numbers regarding new non-contracted employees. I have also provided for you a folder of information that I would like to reference. In that folder, I have included the vacancy report as of today's date, which is October 7th. We show that we have a total of 49 vacancies. Of those 49, 7 are Title I positions, so essentially 42 instructional vacancies plus 7 Title I vacancies. In addition to that, the next attachment I have provided for you, Mr. Orson, you did ask how do we compare with other districts, and this is essentially a comparison from the state, Dr. John Barge's office, in terms of how we compare with resignations to other districts. Please note that we have our October count, which is our FTE CCPI. During our traditional count, we also count the number of teachers who remain. So the numbers that you have before you are the teachers for October 2011, the teachers by district that were on roster for March of 2011. And then of those teachers that were on roster for March of 2011, how many still remained in October of 2011? So please note that that was done for year 2011, October of 2012, and we are currently in October of 2013. We are completing our FTE and CCPI report this month, and that information will be forthcoming for the month of, in December, so that information will be released. But I call your attention to the different attrition and retention rates per district over the course of those school years, seeing that the retention rates for each district is listed. And the second two sheets that support that are just that information, and I took and I summarized it. So once again, Mr. Orson, to answer the questions that you had in terms of how we measure up, that is the information that was provided by the state. The next attachment
Mr. Chairman, could you summarize what the report
Oh, yes, sir,
for the
certainly.
viewers who are in the audience?
Yes, sir. Based upon the information we have regarding retention data, DeKalb ranked 91 percentile for October of 2011. There were 2 districts that were above us. They were Cobb County and Gwinnett. However, there were 3 districts that had a retention rate that was less than DeKalb, and they are Fulton County, Rockdale County, and APS for the school year October 2011. So that's with regard to retention. Once again, we retained 91% of our teachers, as it states to the October FTE count. October 2012, once again, the rates show that DeKalb that particular year retained 88% of our teachers. There were 2 districts that were above DeKalb, which were Cobb County and Gwinnett, once again. However, there were a number of districts that did not, Henry and Rockdale as well, that were above DeKalb. But there were 2 districts that were below DeKalb in terms of retention rates, and they were Fulton County as well as Atlanta Public Schools. As I stated, this particular information for October of 13 will be provided by the state in December, and essentially they will look at the number of teachers who were on the roster for March and how many of those teachers still remain. The last document that I have as it relates to vacancies essentially is a summation of the teachers that have left the district for this school year. I wanted to provide you with that information. It simply shows that for I don't have that document. It's here. For 2011, a total of 540, 2012, 684, and 2013, 852, along with the reason codes for each. And I did not disaggregate that information. I simply took what is reported in our internal system and provided that information for you. This completes the Division of Human Resources report for October 2013.
Is there any discussion? Mr. Mayfield.
Okay, just a couple of questions, just to make sure I understand the retention rate information in relation to the resignation information.
Yes, sir.
Okay, which really speaks to turnover. And so my question is sort of twofold, and that is, are the retention numbers essentially based on the number of positions, the net positions that are filled, or are they based on the turnover that actually takes place in those positions?
Excellent question, Mr. Mayfield. It's actually twofold, because if your retention rates are guided relative to the number of individuals that leave, that's one particular number. But in the district, we cut a number of positions. So say, for instance, last year we have 6,500 positions, whereby this year we only have 6,300 positions. If only 20 are not filled, you can't compare 20 to what would have been 200 the year prior.
Right, right. So that's where I guess, and this to me has a potential correlation to student performance as it relates to the turnover rate that's within those numbers.
It's very relevant information, and I think if you can provide it to us, it will help us have a better understanding of what's going on with our teaching staff in our schools. I just think it's, there's nothing that inhibits us or prohibits us from doing more than the minimum, and I think in that case it's pretty material, and I know that Mr. Coleman has asked for that, and hopefully we can find a way to report it. And I know one of the questions I asked was about the impact on class sizes from the last, how these vacancies were affecting and where they were manifesting themselves based on our class size limit. And I know that's a somewhat tricky question to answer. I understand that it's a little bit of a moving target, but I'd be appreciative of trying to get an understanding about what impact that has had, across our system, because one, it dovetails with an issue of great concern to particularly our parents about where class sizes are going. And so to the extent we have resignations and the extent we're not filling them based on class size increases that are permissible under waivers, that is all part of a larger picture about. And I think it's incumbent upon us to try to report information in a way that doesn't just meet the minimum requirements, because we may have been unartful and inartful in terms of writing the policy, but in a way that we can provide a clear picture of what the system looks like, not just to the board, but to the community. And so that's for the correspondence you have, that I would encourage us to sort of think beyond just the specifics of the policy about how the information is going to be useful for people to understand what's going on in the system. Now, I have a couple of particular questions, which is, when I look at the teacher resignation data that goes from 3 years, there's a couple things that strike me, and I'd like to get a better understanding, and I have a couple other questions after this. But one is, there is a significant upward trend in the number of resignations we have for people seeking another position, a position in another Georgia system. So we had 36 in 2011, we had 77 in 2012, we had 109 in 2013. That's of concern. That means people aren't they're just going somewhere else. And I think we need to have, and that's obviously contributing to the problem of having vacancies in our system. And we know there's been a great morale issue. We know that, what the superintendent is doing, but I think we also need to sort of be honest and be clear that we've had this significant problem, because it also dovetails, and I want a little bit more clarity. The last column of 2013, and it's not listed in 2012 or 2011, talks about resignation contract not accepted of 265, which is a huge number. And I guess the question there is it possible that many of those 265 still ended up in another system and our reporting systems didn't catch that? They're not, is that correct?
Yes, sir. Well,
okay.
I would like to respond to a couple of the questions that you framed.
Okay. Yeah,
Okay.
please.
Yes, sir. As it relates to the actual resignations, yes, sir. The contract not accepted was a code that we added this year. Once again, when comparing DeKalb to other districts, it's important to note that no other system had 6 years of no furloughs, step increases, and cost of living adjustments. So it's important to note that that information is inherent within our numbers. But certainly, I will certainly take your recommendations back to the superintendent, and if directed, add that information.
Okay, and then lastly, just in the system-by-system comparison, so we get a complete picture of the metro area, I'd encourage you to also add Clayton, since I think of everything in the donut, right? So 285 is the donut. If it attaches to the donut, and Clayton is basically adjacent to us, and though they're much smaller, I mean, I'd be curious as to what's happening in the small city systems that are also in the donut, which are Decatur, Marietta, and people mostly forget there's one up in Beaufort. But, you know, those are really the metro school systems, I think, by and large, that people consider, and I think that would also be helpful to have.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? Hearing none, is there any opposition to placing this item on the consent agenda? Hearing none, it will be placed on the consent agenda.